The church bell of Clear Springs was still resonating through the morning air when Grandma Sarah opened her eyes. At 72, her body maintained the discipline of decades waking before sunrise. Beside her, in the wrought-iron bed that had belonged to her mother, little Lily stirred restlessly between the white sheets. "Grandma, he's coming," whispered the girl, her eyes still closed, her voice carrying a certainty that always disconcerted Sarah. "Who's coming, my little granddaughter?" Lily sat up in bed, her chestnut hair falling over her shoulders. Though blind since birth, she always turned her face exactly toward where her grandmother was, as if she could see her perfectly. "The man with the sad water. She showed me in my dreams." Sarah sighed, accustomed to her granddaughter's peculiar visions. Lily spoke to the sacred spring as other children talked to dolls, but this time there was something different in her tone, a gravity that didn't match her 7 years. After breakfast of still warm cheese bread and freshly brewed coffee, Sarah accompanied Lily to the porch. The girl always insisted on sitting in the wooden swing right after waking, saying she needed to hear what the day had to tell. "The water is nervous today, Grandma," said Lily, swinging gently. "There are secrets trying to rise to the surface." Sarah knitted a little blue sweater, her experienced hands moving the needles unhurriedly. She knew that restlessness in her granddaughter. It usually heralded changes in the tranquil routine of Clear Springs. The noise of a powerful engine broke the morning silence. On the dirt road that winds between the mountains, a black car appeared, raising a cloud of reddish dust. Sarah stopped knitting. "It's him," affirmed Lily without hesitation. The vehicle passed through the main square, where old Joe was sweeping the dry leaves that had fallen during the night. Some women returning from the morning market stopped to observe. Cars like that were a rarity in town. "Valencia," murmured Sarah, recognizing the partially visible license plate. Her expression hardened. After so many years. The car continued up the steep road that led to the old abandoned mansion on the hillside. The property had remained empty for 2 decades, since the last of the Valencias had left without explanation. The rusted gates and weed-covered garden told stories that few dared to remember. "Why does the water get sad when it thinks about him, Grandma?" Sarah looked at her granddaughter, surprised by the question. As always, Lily perceived nuances that escaped others. "Those are old stories, child. Things that happened even before you were born. But the water remembers everything, doesn't it? She told me that he carries a great pain here." Lily touched her chest over her heart. "And that this pain has something to do with me." Sarah's hands trembled slightly. There were secrets she had hoped never to reveal, especially to such a young child. But Lily had the gift of extracting truths from the deepest places, like the spring itself that flowed from the bowels of the earth. At that moment, on the hillside mansion, Edward Valencia crossed the rusted gate that hadn't opened in years. At 42, he carried on his shoulders the weight of decisions he had postponed for too long. His hands trembled as he turned the key in the main door's lock. The mansion smelled of stagnant time and regret. Each room held memories he had tried to bury, dusty photographs, furniture covered with white sheets, windows that hadn't seen light for decades. Edward walked directly to the office on the 2nd floor, where a mahogany desk waited untouched. In the bottom right drawer, exactly where he had left it, was the sealed envelope he had never had the courage to open. Inside it, the results of a test that could change not only his life, but also the fate of the small town he now observed through the clouded window. Down below, in the house near the church, Lily suddenly stopped swinging. "He's looking this way, Grandma, and he's crying." Sarah followed her granddaughter's gaze, even knowing she couldn't see. On the top of the mansion, a male silhouette stood out against the office window. The distance was too great to distinguish details, but something in the air changed, as if a storm were forming in a clear sky. "The water said that he needs to know the truth before it's too late," whispered Lily. "But it also said that the truth can hurt more than silence." Sarah hugged her granddaughter, feeling the weight of the years and the decisions she had made to protect her. Edward Valencia had returned, and with him, secrets that could forever transform the peace of Clear Springs. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue." Edward remained at the window for long. Minutes, the envelope between his trembling fingers. The view of the small town transported him to memories he had tried to bury. 20 years ago, those same cobblestone streets witnessed his desperate escape from a responsibility he didn't know how to face. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him turn quickly. A middle-aged woman with grey hair tied in a bun appeared at the office door. "Mr. Edward, I'm Connie. Do you remember me? I worked here when you were young." Edward nodded, forcing a smile. Connie had been hired by phone to take care of the cleaning and organization of the mansion. Her presence brought a comforting familiarity amid the chaos of his emotions. "The house is exactly as your father left it," she said, looking at the covered furniture. "Nobody dared touch anything after you all left. And the town? How is Sarah Sanders?" The name came from his lips with difficulty. Connie noticed the tension in his voice. "Mrs. Sarah is doing well, thank God. Takes care of her little granddaughter with all her love. The girl is special, you know. Has some gifts that leave everyone intrigued." Edward closed his eyes. He knew exactly how special Lily was, even having never had the courage to meet her in person. "Special how?" "She talks to the spring as if it were a person. Knows things she shouldn't know, goes to places she's never seen. The older folks say she inherited the gift from her great-grandmother." Connie didn't mention what everyone whispered in gossip circles, that the girl looked extraordinarily like Edward when he was a child. The same brown hair, the same face shape, the same delicate gestures with her hands. Meanwhile, at the house near the church, Lily played in the yard with cloth dolls made by Sarah. But her attention was turned to the sounds coming from the forest. Something was moving among the trees, something large and gentle. "Grandma, a friend is coming to visit us," said Lily, getting up and walking toward the wooden gate. Sarah came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. She knew that tone of voice from her granddaughter well. Lily always knew when special visitors were approaching. From among the trees emerged a white horse, magnificent and serene. Its coat shone like silver under the light filtered through the leaves. The animal walked directly to Lily, lowering its head in an almost human gesture of greeting. "Hello, Silver," said Lily, extending her hand to touch the horse's muzzle. "I knew you would come today." Sarah watched the scene with a mixture of amazement and recognition. There were stories about white horses in her family, legends passed down for generations about guardians that appeared in times of need. "Where did he come from, little one?" "From the same spring where all important things are born," replied Lily, caressing the silky mane. "He's going to help me take care of the water." The horse allowed Lily to climb onto its back, even without saddle or reins. Together they headed for the trail that led to the sacred spring, located in a clearing in the heart of the forest. At the mansion, Edward decided to face the inevitable. He carefully tore open the envelope he had kept for so long. Inside, the result of a paternity test that confirmed his deepest suspicions. Lily was his daughter. The tears he had held back for years finally streamed down his face. Helen Sanders, Lily's mother, had been the great love of his youth. When she became pregnant, Edward was just a young man of 22, heir to a fortune built on questionable business. His father had pressured him to leave town, promising he would take care of everything. "You cannot ruin the family's future because of a teenage passion," the Valencia patriarch would say. "The girl will be better off without you." Edward had believed his father's words and left to study abroad. When he returned to the United States years later, he learned that Helen had lost her life due to complications during childbirth. The news devastated him, but he didn't have the courage to return and meet the daughter he had left fatherless. Now, 20 years later, the family business was facing difficulties. Edward had returned with the intention of selling the properties in Clear Springs to settle debts, but discovering that Lily had grown up healthy and special changed all his plans. At the spring, Lily chatted with Silver while watching the crystalline water bubbling up from moss-covered rocks. "He's confused, isn't he?" she said to the horse, which neighed softly. "The water told me he wants to do the right thing, but doesn't know what it is." Lily touched the water's surface with her fingertips. Immediately, images formed in her mind. A young man crying upon receiving a letter, a long-haired woman singing a lullaby, a broken promise echoing through the years. "He's my father," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Silver nodded his head, confirming what she already knew. The water never lied to those who knew how to listen to it, and Lily, since she was small, understood every whisper, every bubble, every movement of the sacred spring. When they returned home, Sarah noticed Lily's serene expression. The girl had that distant look that always appeared after her conversations with the spring. "What did it tell you today, dear?" "That the time has come for everyone to know the truth," replied Lily, hugging her grandmother, "and that Silver came to protect us from what's going to happen." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that Edward Valencia had not returned, just to sell properties. Destiny was weaving again the threads it had separated 2 decades ago, and she feared the consequences of this inevitable reunion between father and daughter. The following morning brought an unusual fog to Clear Springs. Edward woke up in the mansion, feeling the weight of the previous night's revelations. The paternity test confirmed what his heart already knew, but now he needed to decide how to act on this information. He dressed simply, jeans and a white shirt, very different from the suits he wore in his business meetings. He wanted to approach his daughter without causing intimidation. After a quick breakfast prepared by Connie, he walked down the trail that led to the center of town. "Is Mr. Edward going to visit someone?" asked Connie, noticing the anxiety in his gestures. I'm going to meet someone very important," he replied, unable to elaborate further. At the house near the church, Lily woke earlier than usual. Silver was grazing in the yard as if he had slept there to protect her. The girl ran to him, hugging his neck. "Today's the day, isn't it?" she whispered in the horse's ear. "He's going to come talk to us." Sarah watched from the kitchen window. She had slept poorly, tormented by nightmares about secrets being revealed and families being separated. She knew she could no longer postpone the conversation she had been avoiding for 7 years. "Lily, come have breakfast. We need to talk." The girl came in, guided by the familiar aromas of warm bread and brewed coffee. She sat at the wooden table where so many meals had been shared. "In peace. Grandma, you're worried." "I can feel it," said Lily, gently touching Sarah's wrinkled hand. "Little one, there are some things about your family that you need to know. About your father." Lily's blind eyes turned exactly toward her grandmother's face, as she always did. Her expression remained serene. "I already know, Grandma. The water told me. He's the man from the mansion, Mr. Edward." Sarah sighed deeply. No matter how accustomed she was, her granddaughter's supernatural intuition would still surprise her. "How do you feel knowing that?" Lily thought for a moment, slowly chewing a piece of cheese bread. "I feel that he's very afraid and very sad. The water says he carries guilt in his heart, but it's a guilt he shouldn't carry." "And would you like to meet him?" "He's already coming," replied Lily simply. "I can hear his footsteps on the stone road." Sarah rose quickly, smoothing her dress and fixing her hair. Indeed, footsteps were approaching the gate. Edward Valencia walked slowly down the street, stopping every few meters, as if fighting against an invisible force pushing him back. When he finally reached the blue-painted wooden gate, his breathing was irregular. On the other side, Lily waited, sitting in the porch swing, with Silver grazing calmly beside her. "Good morning," said Edward, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "Good morning, Mr. Edward," replied Lily, standing up and walking to the gate. "I'm Lily. Mom is expecting you." Sarah appeared at the door, drying her hands on her apron. The meeting she had feared for years was finally happening. "Edward Valencia," she said with a respectful but distant nod. "Mrs. Sarah, I'd like to talk with you both, if possible." Lily opened the gate without hesitation, as if receiving a long-time friend. Edward entered the yard, feeling simultaneously at home and completely out of place. "Would you like to sit on the porch?" "It's breezier there," offered Lily, extending her hand toward him. Edward looked at the small extended hand. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. He accepted the offer, allowing her to guide him to the swing where she had spent so many mornings thinking about life. "Your home is very welcoming," said Edward, trying to start a natural conversation. "Grandma takes care of everything with great love." "She taught me that a home is made of love, not beautiful furniture," replied Lily, sitting beside him on the swing. Sarah brought fresh coffee and homemade cookies, but remained standing, watching the interaction between father and daughter with protective attention. "Lily, do you know who I am?" asked Edward, finally gathering courage. "I know. You're my father, and you're here because you want to fix something that broke a long time ago." The simplicity of the answer hit Edward like lightning. Tears appeared in his eyes without warning. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for not being here for you, for not knowing your mother better, for not being the father you deserved." Lily extended her hand and touched his face, feeling the tears that ran down. "The water told me you were very young and that older people made choices for you. It wasn't your fault." Edward held the small hand against his face, feeling decades of pain and regret beginning to dissolve. "Do you forgive me?" "There's nothing to forgive, Daddy. What matters is that you're here now." Sarah watched the scene with tears in her eyes. She saw the man Edward could have been if circumstances were different, and also saw Lily's pure goodness transforming pain into hope. Silver approached the swing as if wanting to be part of that special moment. Edward looked at the magnificent animal. "This is Silver, my special friend," said Lily. "He takes care of me and the spring." Edward cautiously extended his hand. To his surprise, the horse accepted it, allowing him to touch its velvety muzzle. "He likes you," observed Lily. "That's a good sign. Silver only trusts people with pure hearts." In that moment, sitting on the porch swing, Edward felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the sensation of being home. And for the first time since returning to Clear Springs, he could visualize a future different from what he had planned. A week had passed since Edward's first meeting with Lily. During these days, he had established a routine of daily visits, always in late afternoon, when the girl returned from her walks in the forest with Silver. Conversations between father and daughter flowed naturally, as if they were just catching up on lost time. Edward discovered that Lily loved stories. He told her about his travels around the world, about big cities and different cultures, always taking care to omit the darker aspects of his business. In exchange, she told him about the spring, about the medicinal plants that Sarah had taught her to identify, and about the dreams the water sent her. "Daddy, why did you stay away from here for so long?" asked Lily one afternoon as they swung together on the porch. Edward hesitated. How to explain to a 7-year-old child the financial pressures, the complicated business, and especially the fear that had paralyzed him for so long? "Sometimes adults make choices they think are right at the time, but later realize were wrong," he replied, carefully choosing his words. "And now, will you stay?" It was the question Edward feared. That morning, he had received 3 urgent calls from New York. His partners were pressuring him for an answer about selling the properties in Clear Springs. The company's debts were becoming unsustainable, and those lands represented the only viable financial way out. "I want to stay, Lily, more than anything in the world." "But there are people asking you to leave, aren't there?" Lily's intuition never failed to surprise him. Edward nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. At that moment, a different black car from his parked in front of the gate. 2 men in suits stepped out, visibly uncomfortable with the heat and simplicity of the small town. "Mr. Valencia," one of them called out, "we need to speak with you urgently." Edward recognized Robert Miller, his majority partner, and Dr. Andrews, the company lawyer. Their unexpected arrival could only mean that the situation was worse than he imagined. "Stay here with Grandma, sweetheart. Daddy needs to take care of some things," said Edward, kissing Lily's forehead. "They bring problems," she whispered. "The water warned me that men with grey hearts would come to try to take you away." Edward walked to the gate, feeling torn between 2 completely different worlds. "Robert, Dr. Andrews, I wasn't expecting you here." "We needed to come in person," said Robert, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The situation is critical, Edward. The banks are losing patience. We have an exceptional purchase offer for the lands, added Dr. Andrews, showing a folder with documents. A group of international investors wants to build a luxury resort in the spring area. Edward felt his blood freeze. The sacred spring was the heart of Lily's life, the place where she connected with the world in a way he still didn't fully understand. No, those lands are not for sale. Edward, be sensible, insisted Robert. We're talking about $50 million. It's more than enough to pay off all the debts and still have enough left to start over. And there's another problem, interrupted Dr. Andrews, lowering his voice. If we don't pay off the debts by the end of the month, your personal assets will be seized, including this mansion and all properties here. Edward looked back, seeing Lily, still sitting on the swing, petting Silver, who had approached as if sensing her distress. Give me more time to think. There is no more time, said Robert firmly. The buyers want an answer by tomorrow. If we refuse, they'll look for land in another region. After the partners left, Edward returned to the porch, visibly shaken. Sarah had prepared chamomile tea, sensing the tension in the air. Financial problems? She asked, without beating around the bush. Edward nodded, sitting heavily beside Lily. You could lose everything, couldn't you? Said the girl, touching his hand. How do you know? The water showed me. Men in suits want to build a very big house where she lives. That would make her sick. Edward understood that Lily was talking about the resort that would be built in the spring area. The prospect of seeing that sacred place transformed into a tourist development made him sick. Lily, if I lose these lands, I might have to leave. Again, and this time I might not be able to come back. The girl was silent for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to Silver, whispering something in his ear. The horse neighed softly and touched its muzzle to her forehead. The water has a solution, said Lily, returning to her father. But you need to trust her completely. What kind of solution? She's going to show something that's been hidden for a long time. Something that will change everything. Sarah and Edward exchanged looks. Both knew that when Lily spoke that way, something extraordinary was about to happen. When? Tonight, when the moon is highest, the water said it's time for all secrets to be revealed. Edward felt a shiver run down his spine. He was about to discover that the greatest mysteries of Clear Springs were yet to be unraveled, and that his daughter was the key to secrets that could change not only his life, but the destiny of the entire region. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The full moon illuminated the mountains of Clear Springs with an almost supernatural silvery brightness. Edward had barely been able to eat dinner, consumed by anxiety about the financial ultimatum and curiosity about Lily's mysterious promise. At 11 o'clock at night, as agreed, he went to Sarah's house. He found grandmother and granddaughter waiting on the porch, both dressed in light-colored clothes that seemed to glow under the moonlight. Silver waited in the yard, more alert than ever, as if sensing the importance of that night. It's time, said Lily simply, extending her hand to Edward. The three walked in silence along the trail that led to the spring. Sarah carried a flashlight, but the moonlight was so intense they barely needed it. The only sound was that of their own footsteps on the dry leaves and the distant murmur of running water. Lily, are you sure it's safe to be here so late? Asked Edward, still not accustomed to his daughter's mystical practices. Night is when the water speaks most clearly, she replied, and today it has many important things to tell. When they reached the spring clearing, Edward was impressed by the beauty of the place under the moonlight. The water flowed from a moss-covered rock formation, creating small waterfalls that transformed into a crystalline stream. Centuries-old trees formed a natural cathedral around the sacred space. Lily walked directly to the edge of the spring and knelt, touching the water's surface with both hands. Immediately, her expression changed, becoming more concentrated and distant. She's agitated today, she murmured. There's something important buried here for a long time. Buried? Asked Edward. Sarah knew this state of her granddaughter. Lily was entering a kind of trance, connecting deeply with the energy of the place. There, said Lily suddenly, pointing to a specific tree on the opposite bank. Under the big fig tree, there's a heart-shaped stone. Edward and Sarah crossed the stream, wetting their feet in the icy water. There was indeed a peculiarly shaped stone near the exposed roots of the tree. Edward knelt and began digging with his hands. "There's something here," he said, feeling a solid object beneath the damp earth. After a few minutes of careful excavation, Edward removed an aged but still well-preserved metal box. It was the size of a shoebox, with an old lock that had withstood time. "How did you know this was here?" he asked Lily. "The water keeps the memories of everything that happens around it," she replied, still in a state of deep concentration. "It showed me a man who looked a lot like you hiding this box here, a long time ago." Edward examined the box more closely. On the lid, engraved with letters almost erased by time, was written E. Valencia, 1895. His great-grandfather, Ethan Valencia, the founder of the family fortune. "We need to open it," said Sarah, sensing the importance of the moment. The lock was rusty, but with some effort, Edward managed to force it. Inside the box, protected by a waxed cloth, were yellowed documents, old photographs, and a leather-bound diary. Edward picked up the diary with trembling hands. The first page was written in elegant 19th-century calligraphy. "Diary of Ethan Valencia. Year of our Lord 1895. May God forgive me for the sins I committed in the name of ambition, and may this truth be known when the time comes for the family's redemption." "What's written, Daddy?" asked Lily, approaching. Edward began reading, aloud. "I came to Clear Springs as an adventurer in search of gold. I found something much more valuable, a spring with extraordinary properties. The water has unique minerals that can cure various ailments. But to take possession of the land, I had to deceive the Indian guardians of the place, promising to protect the sacred spring forever." Edward paused, the weight of the revelation falling on him like a stone. "I broke my promise. I exploited the spring commercially, grew rich selling its miraculous water to distant cities. The guardian's curse fell upon me. My descendants would carry the weight of this betrayal until someone from the family made the right choice to return the land to its true protectors." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, finally understanding many things that had always intrigued her about the region's history. Edward continued reading. "I discovered too late that the spring only maintains its healing properties while under the protection of those who have a spiritual connection with it. When I tried to exploit it commercially, the water gradually lost its power. Therefore, I bury here the original documents that prove this land belongs, by ancestral right, to the descendants of the Indian guardians." "The documents," murmured Edward, searching through the papers inside the box. He found an original deed, signed by his great-grandfather himself, legally transferring ownership of all the land around the spring to the eternal guardians of the sacred water. A description that, according to later annotations, specifically referred to the lineage of women who maintained the tradition of caring for the spring. "This means," began Edward, "that this land belongs to you," he said, looking at Sarah and Lily. "Legally, for more than a century." Lily smiled serenely, as if she already knew everything. "The water said your great-grandfather was a good man who made mistakes when young, but tried to fix them before leaving. It waited a long time to show where the truth was hidden." Edward understood that he no longer needed to sell the lands to outside investors. In fact, he wasn't even the legal owner. But more important than that, he finally understood why the spring had called Lily to be its guardian, and why he had been brought back at that exact moment. The solution to his financial problems was right in front of him, but not in the way he had imagined. And for the first time in years, Edward felt he was exactly where he should be. Dawn found Edward sitting on the porch of his mansion, documents spread out on the wicker table. He had spent the night awake, reading and rereading each page of his great-grandfather's diary, trying to fully comprehend the implications of the discovery. Connie brought strong coffee and still warm cheese bread, noticing that he hadn't slept. "Mr. Edward, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have, Connie, or at least discovered truths that my ancestors preferred to forget." Around 9 o'clock, Robert and Dr. Andrews appeared again. anxious for a definitive answer about selling the lands. "Edward, we hope you've made the sensible decision," said Robert, entering the mansion's main hall. "The buyers are impatient." "Please, sit down. I need to explain some things I discovered last night." Edward showed them the documents found at the spring. Dr. Andrews carefully examined the original deed, verifying seals and signatures with a magnifying glass. "This is extraordinary," murmured the lawyer. "If these documents are authentic, and they appear to be, you technically were never the legal owner of these lands." "Exactly. Which means I can't sell them, even if I wanted to." Robert turned red with anger. "Edward, you're being ridiculous. Are you willing to ruin us because of old papers and local superstitions?" "They're not superstitions, Robert. And it's not just about papers. It's about correcting a historical error. Of my family." Dr. Andrews continued examining the documents. "There's another important issue here," he said. "If the spring really has proven medicinal properties, as the diary suggests, this could have immense scientific and commercial value." Edward thought for a moment. An idea was beginning to form in his mind. "What if I told you I found a solution that can solve our financial problems without harming anyone?" That afternoon, Edward went to Sarah's house with a proposal. He found her in the yard, harvesting medicinal herbs while Lily played with Silver. "Mrs. Sarah, I need to talk to you about an idea." They sat on the porch with Lily between them. Edward took a deep breath before starting. "The lands are legally yours. That's clear in the documents, but I'd like to propose a partnership." "What kind of partnership?" asked Sarah, cautious. "A foundation. Something that allows for scientific study of the spring's properties, developing natural treatments, but always respecting the sacred nature of the place." Lily touched her father's hand. "The water likes that idea. It wants to help people, but in the right way this time." Edward smiled, always amazed by his daughter's intuition. "I would invest my business knowledge and contacts. You would be the main owners and guardians. Any profit would be divided equally, but with the condition that the spring would never be commercially exploited on a large scale." Sarah reflected for a long moment. "And your partners? Your debts?" "I can offer them participation in the foundation. It's a more sustainable alternative than selling the lands. Dr. Andrews has already shown interest in researching the legal and scientific aspects." Lily stood up and walked to the spring, which was visible from the porch. She remained silent for a few minutes, as if consulting the water. "She agrees," she said when she returned. "But she has one condition." "What's that?" "You need to move here permanently. The water says your family's redemption will only be complete when a Valencia chooses to live here not as an owner, but as a protector." Edward felt a deep emotion touch his heart. It was exactly what he most desired but hadn't dared to hope for. "Does this mean I can be your real father? Every day?" "It means we're finally a real family," replied Lily, hugging him. Sarah watched the scene with tears in her eyes. She had raised Lily with all her love, but had always known that one day the girl would need to know her paternal roots. "Edward, are you sure? Living here is very different from the life you led in big cities." "Mrs. Sarah, I spent 20 years trying to run away from who I really am. Now I want to spend the rest of my life fixing the mistakes of the past and building something good with you." At that moment, Silver approached the group, as if wanting to participate in the family conversation. Lily laughed and hugged the horse's neck. "Silver approves too. He says you have a heart that matches ours." Edward spent the following days organizing his new life. He explained the foundation proposal to his partners, presenting preliminary studies on the therapeutic potential of mineral waters with composition similar to the springs. Robert, initially reluctant, ended up interested in the innovative aspect of the project. Dr. Andrews was enthusiastic about the possibility of working on something legally pioneering in America, a foundation that combined environmental preservation, scientific research, and historical justice. "It's a brilliant idea, Edward," he said. "It can serve as a model for other similar cases in the country." Edward began transferring his belongings from New York to the mansion in Clear Springs. Each object that arrived represented a definitive decision to restart his life. Lily followed the entire process with serene joy. Sometimes Edward found her talking with Silver about plans for the future, always including elements he had never mentioned, as if she instinctively knew what was to come. "Daddy, the water wants to know if you're going to teach other people to respect it like we do," she said one night. "I will, my daughter. I'll spend the rest of my life learning from you how to do this the right way." Edward finally felt he had found his place in the world, but he still didn't know that the greatest test of his transformation was about to arrive, and that Lily held one last secret that would change everything once more. 3 months had passed since Edward had moved definitively to Clear Springs. The foundation was officially established, the first scientific studies of the spring had begun, and a healthy family routine had settled among him, Lily, and Sarah. Edward woke early every morning to accompany Lily on her walks to the spring. It was during these intimate moments that father and daughter talked about everything, from school lessons to the mysteries of nature that she perceived with such clarity. "Daddy, can I ask an important question?" said Lily one morning, as they watched Silver drink water at the edge of the stream. "Of course, my daughter. You can. Ask anything. Do you believe some people are born with a special mission in life?" Edward stopped walking, intrigued by the seriousness of the question. "I believe we all have a purpose. Why do you ask?" Lily knelt at the edge of the spring, touching the water as she always did before speaking about important matters. Water told me something I never told you, about why I was born blind and about what will happen to me when I grow up." Edward felt a tightness in his chest. He had learned to deeply respect Lily's special connections with the spring, but still worried when she spoke about such serious matters. "What did it tell you?" "That I was born this way so I could see things that normal eyes can't see. And that when I turn 15, I'll have to make a very important choice." "What kind of choice?" Lily remained silent for a long moment, as if listening to voices only she could perceive. "The spring will offer me a gift. It can give me common vision, so I can see the world like all other people. But if I accept, I'll forever lose the ability to talk with it and with Silver." Edward knelt beside his daughter, gently touching her shoulder. "And what do you want to do?" "I don't know, Daddy. Sometimes I'm very curious to really see your face, to see the colors of flowers, to see what the blue sky everyone talks about looks like. But at the same time, I'm afraid of losing this special connection that makes me who I am." Edward felt tears welling in his eyes. His daughter, at 7 years old, was already facing dilemmas that many adults would never have to consider. "Lily, whatever your choice, I'll support you completely. You're perfect exactly as you are, but you also have the right to decide about your own life. There's one more thing, Daddy. The water said this choice isn't just mine. It will affect the entire region for generations." "How so?" "If I choose to keep my special gifts, I'll become the definitive guardian of the spring. This means it will continue to have healing powers and protect the mountains. But if I choose common vision, the water's powers will gradually diminish, until it becomes just a normal spring." Edward understood the magnitude of the responsibility that weighed on his little daughter's shoulders. She wasn't just deciding about her own life, but about the future of a natural and spiritual heritage that had existed for centuries. "How long do you have to decide?" 8 years, but the water said it's important to talk about this with the people I love, so everyone can help me understand what's best. That night, Edward talked at length with Sarah about Lily's revelation. The woman, as always, demonstrated a calm wisdom in the face of extraordinary situations. "I suspected this. Day would come," she said, knitting calmly on the porch. "My great-grandmother faced a similar choice when she was 15. She chose to keep the gifts, and that's why our family became guardians of the spring for generations. And you? If it were you, what would you choose?" Sarah stopped knitting and looked at the stars. "Edward, this is a decision only Lily can make. Our role is to love her and support her, regardless of the path she chooses." In the following days, Edward observed Lily with new understanding. He saw how she moved through the world with confidence and joy, how her visual impairment never prevented her from living fully. But he also noticed moments of silent curiosity, when she touched objects trying to imagine their colors, or when she asked questions about what people's facial expressions were like. One afternoon, while they were playing in the yard, Lily asked a question that caught Edward by surprise. "Daddy, if I could see, would you think I'd be happier?" Edward thought carefully before answering. "Lily, happiness doesn't come from what we can see with our eyes, but from what we feel with our hearts. You're one of the happiest people I know, and that has nothing to do with your vision. But what if I could help more people if I could see? I could work as a doctor, or a teacher, or do other important things." "My daughter, you already help. More people than you imagine. The research we're doing at the Spring, thanks to your gifts, can lead to the discovery of new medical treatments. You're protecting a natural treasure that benefits the entire region." Lily hugged her father, nestling in his arms. "I'm lucky to have you helping me think about these difficult things. And I'm lucky to have such a wise and brave daughter." That night, Edward had a vivid dream. He saw Lily at 15 walking to the Spring to make her final choice. In the dream, she looked directly at him with eyes that shone like stars and said, "Thank you for teaching me that true love means supporting the choices of those we love, even when they're different from what we desire for them." Edward woke up knowing that regardless of Lily's decision, he would be by her side, and that perhaps this was the true redemption his family needed, learning to love without trying to control, to protect without possessing, and to accept life's mysteries with humility and gratitude. 2 years later, the bell of Clear Springs Church was ringing softly on the sunny Sunday morning when Edward woke to the familiar sound of laughter coming from the yard. Through the window, he saw Lily, now 9 years old, teaching a group of visiting children about the medicinal plants that grew around the spring. The Clearwater's Guardian Foundation had become a model of success in the country. Scientists from various universities came to study the unique properties of the spring, always under Lily's careful supervision and Edward's administrative guidance. What had begun as a desperate solution to financial problems had transformed into a pioneering project of environmental conservation and scientific research. Edward went down to the yard, where he found Sarah preparing a special lunch. That day marked exactly 2 years since his definitive move to town, and they had planned a small celebration. "Good morning, family," he said, kissing Lily's forehead and hugging Sarah. "Good morning, Daddy. Look how many children came to visit us today," said Lily cheerfully, pointing to the group now playing with Silver, who had become a special attraction for the young visitors. Edward observed the scene with deep satisfaction. Lily had developed a natural talent for educating other children about the importance of caring for nature. Even without seeing, she managed to transmit knowledge in such an engaging way that children were fascinated. "Dr. Thomas arrived from Washington last night," informed Sarah. "He said he has important news about the research." Dr. Thomas was the scientist who led the studies on the spring's medicinal properties. His preliminary findings confirmed that the water possessed a unique combination of minerals that indeed enhanced natural treatments for various health conditions. When the researcher arrived for lunch, he brought with him a report that would forever change the scientific perception of the spring. "Edward, Lily, you won't believe what we've discovered," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. "The spring water not only has healing properties, it has the ability to regenerate cells at an accelerated rate, but only when in contact with people who maintain a positive emotional connection with the environment." "What do you mean?" asked Edward. "We tested the water with different people. Those who approach the spring with respect and genuine connection to nature show surprising healing results. But with people who see the place merely as a commercial resource, the water demonstrates completely normal chemical properties." Lily smiled serenely, as if she had known this information for a long time. "The water chooses who it wants to help," she said simply. "It has always done that." Dr. Thomas continued, "This explains why your ancestors were able to exploit it commercially at first, but then it lost its properties. The spring only responds to genuine intentions of healing and protection." Edward understood that Lily wasn't just the guardian of the spring, she was the very key that kept its special properties active. Her pure and selfless connection with the water was what allowed it to continue helping people. That afternoon, after the visitors left, the family gathered on the porch for their daily conversation. It was a ritual they had developed. Every end of day they sat together to share thoughts and plans. "Lily, how do you feel knowing that your connection with the spring is so important to so many people?" asked Edward. The girl swung gently on the swing, Silver grazing peacefully in the yard. "I feel happy because I can help, but sometimes I worry if I'm doing everything right." "You are, dear," assured Sarah. "Your pure heart is exactly what the spring needs." Edward looked at his daughter with a love that grew every day. She had taught him more about life in 2 years than he had learned in decades of business and travels around the world. "Lily, regardless of the choice you make when you turn 15, I want you to know that I'm the proudest father in the world. You've transformed me into a better person. I'm happy to have you as my daddy too. And you know what? I think I already know what choice I'll make." Edward and Sarah looked at each other, surprised. "You've decided already?" "The water showed me something important in the last few months. It said my mission isn't just to be a guardian, but to teach other people to be guardians too. If I can see with my eyes, I can travel to other places and teach about the importance of protecting nature." Edward was moved by the maturity of Lily's reflection. "And your special gifts?" "The water said that if my intention is pure, it will always continue talking to me even if I choose to see. What's important isn't the powers, but the love I feel for it and for all the people it can help." At that moment, Edward understood that his family's true redemption wasn't just in correcting the mistakes of the past, but in creating a legacy of love and protection that would extend for future generations. "Then let's prepare to support whatever decision you make," he said, hugging his daughter. As the sun set over the mountains of Clear Springs, Edward looked around and saw his transformed life. A wise and loving daughter, a mother-in-law who had become a second mother, a job that made a difference in the world, and an inner peace he had never imagined possible. Silver approached the group as he always did in times of family reflection. Lily caressed his white mane and whispered, "Thank you for bringing my daddy back home." Edward smiled, finally understanding that this small town between mountains wasn't just where Lily had been born, it was where his own soul had been reborn. The spring continued murmuring softly among the stones, guarding ancient secrets and nourishing future hopes, protected by the love of a family that had learned that life's greatest treasures cannot be bought, sold, or possessed, only cared for, shared, and transmitted with the